are listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joined with me, as always, is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man. So, preseason has started, which is so weird to say because we're in December.
And with no summer league either.
No summer league. No, like, very, very short training camps. We're talking, like, maybe, like...
a week.
Less than that, maybe?
To be honest. James Harden just got to the team, so...
Yeah, James Harden was working out in Las Vegas, as he claimed. But yeah, man, the NBA season's about to kick off. And like we promised you in last week's episode, we're going to bring you the Eastern Conference predictions. So if you missed last week's episode, definitely check it out. It'll be up on the card for the YouTube viewers and in the show notes for the audio listeners out there. But yeah, in the last episode, we basically gave a whole predictions on the Western Conference standings. We broke things down as far as, you know, seeding, where we thought teams were going to fall and how we thought the Western Conference is going to unfold for this upcoming season. So we're back this week to do the same thing with the Eastern Conference. And this is, honestly, I think it was harder than last time to do it.
No, man. We said it last episode too. This year, the West and the East have been absolutely, like, crazy. Like, they're so hard to predict because of the fact that there's so many good teams this year, man. Everyone from, like, top to bottom nearly is, like, stacked, you know. We're even, like, debating up to pretty much, like, the 9th, the 10th seeds in the East. Not even in the West. Yeah. Obviously, that discussion happens in the West every single year, right? But in the East this year, me and Hani were debating the 9th, the 10th seed, the 11th seed. Like, it's a very, you know, competitive league this year.
Especially for the reputation the Eastern Conference has gotten for being the Leastern Conference and all the jokes that ran that the East was just always a weak conference. Now you can just see there's a lot of competition in this conference, especially now since LeBron left.
I think that narrative has been dead for the past few years, though.
Yeah, it's been dead for the past few years, but I think one thing you do notice is since LeBron has left, more stars have been moving from the West over to the East.
It's the LeBron effect, bro.
It is the LeBron effect. But yeah, man. So we're here to break down the Eastern Conference. We're going to obviously start off in our typical fashion with the number 1 seed in the conference. And this year, we're going to stick with what we know. And we're going to go with the Milwaukee Bucks retaining the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference this year. Last season, they finished first in the East with a record of 56-17. And to be quite honest with you, if we didn't get the stoppage of play with COVID, they probably would have won 60 games. Like, they were on historic pace last season.
No, they definitely would have won 60 games.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So we're talking about a 60-win team here. They might have actually gotten a bit better from last year, you know, with the additions of Drew Holiday, DJ Augustine, Bryn Forbes,
Bobby Portis.
So Milwaukee loaded up. I mean, they did lose a couple pieces. I mean, they did have to trade away George Hill, Eric Bledsoe, Robin Lopez left the team, obviously. But man, we've seen it for the last few years. Milwaukee has always been a very good regular season team, especially since Giannis. I mean, he's very unsuperstar-like in the sense that he will play his hardest in the regular season.
It comes from that, I think, you know, his mentality. He's always had that work hard mentality, that kind of like blue-collar mentality of, you know, not taking any days off. And we've seen that for the past couple of seasons where superstars of his caliber would not try that hard in the regular season. But he does it. To his credit and to his fault as well, right? It can be argued that maybe he goes a bit too hard. But, you know, you do have to appreciate it from the standpoint of, you know, he's earning his money, right? He's not taking any days off. He's not BSing the job. He's going out and he's treating every single game like, you know, it's a real impactful game.
And, you know, and you got to respect that about Giannis, obviously, and I think that translates well over to his team, because when your superstar is playing his hardest of every possession on the floor, it motivates his teammates to do that. So from a leadership perspective, that's a great element that Giannis brings to the Bucks. And then obviously, I mean, the Bucks bring that consistency. You know, they've been a great team for the last few years. They've been under Mike Budenholzer's system, and Mike Budenholzer has proven that he's a great regular season coach. Postseason, that's another conversation for Mike Budenholzer. But as far as the number 1 seed goes, I mean,
Yeah, they're a great team, man. They're good on both sides of the ball, and again, as
Very
Hani,
good.
yeah, Hani talked about, might have gone even a bit better with the addition of Drew Holiday, especially. So you're looking at a Milwaukee Bucks team that we've seen be the first seed for the past 2 years. I mean, why not repeat that again? It's not the playoffs, so playoffs are a different story. Obviously, we need to see what happens in the playoffs. But regular season wise, we know what the Milwaukee Bucks bring, how good they're going to be, and which is why we have them as our first seed this year. Moving on to our number 2 seed this year, we have the Boston Celtics, who last year had
it hurts.
Yeah, it hurts. It hurts as a Raptors fan to say it, but we have the Boston Celtics as our number 2 seed, who last year had a 48-24 record, good for the third spot in the Eastern Conference. Now, obviously, for Boston, I mean, they didn't have that much turnover, you can say. They did lose. Their biggest, loss was obviously Gordon Hayward. But it can be argued that, this was not too big of a loss, despite how good of a player Gordon Hayward is. It's just too much of a... There was just too much of a logjam at the forward spots.
And financial commitment.
Yeah, and financial commitment, exactly. There's just too much of an overlap, right, in the talents of Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum. So it might be, a good thing that they got rid of Gordon Hayward, even though, for one thing, they're definitely going to miss his playmaking, which they definitely need that. And Gordon Hayward was like one of the only people on their team that consistently could do that for the other guys who were obviously looking to score a lot more. Though they did, again, they brought in guys like Jeff Teague, they brought in Tristan Thompson as well. So, they tried to mitigate that loss as best as they could. But, as we talked about with the Milwaukee Bucks as well, it's the issue of, it's the thing about consistency, right?
Yeah.
Like they have a similar team as last year. Obviously, Gordon Hayward has barely played in his Boston Celtics tenure as it is, right? So it's not like there's too much of a difference in what their team is going to be this year. But it comes down to consistency, as I said. They're, for the most part, the same team. They've had the same system for a number of years now. And their young guys are just going to look to take the next step. Obviously, we've heard stuff about Jason Tatum being 6'10" now, which is insane. If Jason Tatum is 6'10" now, that's going to be insane.
With his skill set?
That's crazy. But yeah, we saw last year, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown definitely took that next step forward. And
Jaylen Brown especially, man.
Jaylen Brown was good. And then hopefully Kemba Walker's already gotten off to a rough start. But hopefully, he recovers well. And then especially in the playoffs as well, last year we saw Marcus Smart also, I think, kind of take a jump to that next level. Unfortunately, as Raptors fans, we saw that. But it happened.
5 threes.
It happened. And Boston is good enough to get to that second seed this year.
Yeah, I mean, Boston, it hurts to say it as a Raptor fan, but Boston is a really great team, man. Like, it's incredible how they have this core group of young players in Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, and these guys are only getting better. Imagine Jason Tatum now 6'10" with the type of jumper that he's got.
Apparently, Aaron Nesmith is good too.
Oh, and Aaron Nesmith, who's probably one of the best shooters coming out of the draft. Going to Boston. It's crazy.
They know how to draft.
They know how to draft. As much as I dislike the Celtics from a fan's perspective, I dislike the Celtics fans.
I dislike the Celtics organization.
Yeah, okay.
But you have to give credit where it's due.
You got to respect them in the regards that they're a good team and they're going to definitely be a solid team in the regular season, especially when you factor in the consistency that they're coming in with. Boston, number 2 seed, which brings us to the number 3 seed, and it's a bit of we got burned last time for putting this team higher than we should have, but we're hoping that this time it might be different. We're putting the Philadelphia 76ers as the 3rd seed. Now, last year they were a 43-30 team that gave them I believe the 6th seed in the conference. And honestly, the biggest thing with Philly is they completely changed their team, and they did exactly what we kind of wanted them to do, was fix roster construction. Now they have a team that can shoot, by bringing in guys like Danny Green, Seth Curry,
especially.
Bringing in these type of players that now bring shooting to complement their 2 stars. They have a solid supporting cast of players. And it comes down to they have Doc Rivers over Brett Brown. Like,
listen, we've had our criticisms of Doc Rivers, but Doc Rivers compared to Brett Brown, right? There's a huge difference in that.
and I mean, it's not even like from the X's and O's perspective. I think
it is from that perspective.
A bit of it has to come there as well, but I think a lot of it has to do with the leadership, the experience that Doc Rivers kind of comes with. He knows how to keep the egos of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid in check.
And he knows how to manage. He knows at least how to manage, the playoffs and whatnot. I mean, that can be argued right now, but the point is he's gone on deep playoff runs. He's been in the playoffs for a number of seasons. Yeah, exactly. He's won a championship. Brett Brown, on the other hand, you could tell every single playoffs, right? This guy got flustered. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know the right decisions to make. At least Doc Rivers will have a bit more stability in that regard, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, Philly is going to be better, and I think based on what we've seen so far in preseason, they look very, very good. Like, they've figured out how to use Embiid and Simmons, and it's working. It's working so far.
They have a number of shooters on the roster, right? That's the main difference from their team last year. Obviously, we talked about Danny Green, Seth Curry. Matisse Thybulle is another young player who's going to be good for them. He was already very good in his rookie season. They brought leadership presence of Dwight Howard, right? Furkan Korkmaz, Shake Milton, who I really like as well, who's also a very good player. So up and down now, they have a very consistent team. So if their two stars just stay healthy, right, I think we'll see a lot more of the team that we saw a couple of years ago rather than the team from last year. Especially also, we didn't touch upon it right now, but Daryl Morey, he'll probably do some things in the middle of the season.
Maybe a trade deadline move or two.
Yeah, exactly. So he'll probably pull some stuff too. So, at least you have a capable hand running the organization, whereas before you had like Elton Brand just screwing everything up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Philadelphia is our third seed. Moving on to our fourth seed, we have the Brooklyn Nets. So obviously last year they had a 35-37 record, good for seventh seed in the Eastern Conference. The thing with the Nets is, obviously we'll see what happens in the playoffs. I think there's a lot of questions surrounding this team, right? And there's a lot of, I think, boomer bust potential, right? There's a lot of boomer bust potential for this team. But in terms of the regular season, their team is very, very good, man. Like, not just the additions of KD and Kyrie coming back, which KD especially and Kyrie also have looked like their regular selves, which is obviously that's great, considering the type of stuff they were dealing with, the injuries, especially Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Kevin Durant is
the Achilles, the Achilles, and him looking like regular Kevin Durant again, is huge for them. Now, not just those two stars, but also as we saw last year in the playoffs, the rest of their team. Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, Torian Prince, Spencer Dinwiddie. They have Jarrett Allen coming off the bench to back up DeAndre Jordan. They acquired Landry Shamet. They re-signed Tyler Johnson. They still have TLC, Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot. They're a very good team, man. Like, up and down the roster. Even if they decide to stay put with this team and not trade anybody, they have the potential, at least on paper, to contend for a championship.
I mean, I'm not that optimistic on Brooklyn this year. Honestly speaking, the way I see it is that the reason why we put them as the 4th seed is because, again, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are just that good and that talented of players to the point where they will pull this team to wins, like in the regular season. My question with this team in regards to playoffs and how well are they going to perform? Because so far, we have not seen Kevin Durant nor Kyrie Irving be true postseason leaders. But that, again, since we're doing regular season predictions,
it doesn't factor in.
It doesn't factor in. And like Zeeshan was saying, like, the roster, the amount of the young talent paired with these two superstars, it's a really good team.
Now, the reason why we might not have them higher, again, we talked about Kyrie Irving, his injury history throughout the regular season. Some of the other guys also, it comes down to them having kind of a bit of a new team, right? And consistency issues. And then, compare that to Philly, Boston, and Milwaukee, who we just think are going to be better.
Well, they've been together for longer.
Exactly. And it comes down to the fact that the Eastern Conference is very, as we said, loaded.
We were honestly I think what was it? It was between Brooklyn, Philly, and the next team we're going to talk about. Like their order was very, very close. Speaking of the next team, the fifth seed that we're predicting for this year is going to be the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat finished with a 44-29 record last season, which was good enough for fifth in the conference. And honestly, with Miami, they brought back basically the same roster as last year that they went to the NBA Finals with. You know, they added Mo Harkless and Avery Bradley.
Their one biggest loss was Jay Crowder.
Yeah, Jay Crowder was their biggest loss, but they did make up for it, I think, bringing in, Harkless and Bradley. And then this is still a solid team, especially, if Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo can stay healthy. We saw what they did last year, how good they were, like, offensively. We can already see, like, Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn. Their young players are getting better. And again, pairing that with the veterans, with the stars, and the Miami the Heat culture, which is now a real thing.
It's been a real thing.
It's been a real thing. We just kind of acknowledged it recently, but
no, we haven't, bro. We've acknowledged it from time, and we're talking about when they didn't even make the playoffs and they were still a good team.
We've acknowledged their try-hardness, but the Heat culture part of it, that kind of, at least for me,
I mean, that factors in.
At least for me, anyways, that kind of was more of a recent thing I jumped onto. But no, it's definitely something that's real. Pat Riley is not going to let his team lose at all, unless he's going to make them run suicide in a gym or do something crazy like that. But this Heat team is going to be good. But the reason why we put them as a 5 seed instead of putting them over Brooklyn or Philadelphia is just the roster isn't as good. Like the talent levels on Philly and Brooklyn just seem better on paper than what we're getting in Miami, especially when you consider that they mainly have one superstar in Jimmy Butler. Like, if Jimmy Butler gets hurt or gets injured, it's not going to be the same team, which is not something that we can say with Brooklyn or Philadelphia, because you still have another dominant superstar along with them.
And a number of good, role players, whereas Miami, you look at, like, Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, and Bam Adebayo, of course. And then you look down the roster after that. Goran Dragic is good, but obviously he's getting older as well. Like, you look at the roster after that, it's a bit iffy.
Well, like, Bam can take that next step and maybe become that presence to, if Jimmy gets hurt, he can take over. But as of right now, he's just not that type of guy. He's a great number 2 option, but you can't rely upon Bam Adebayo to be your only option.
Especially as a scoring threat.
Yeah.
Now, everything else he's great at, obviously.
Yeah.
But in terms of, the scoring presence, you need to be a number 1 on nights where Jimmy Butler's not there. He's not at that level right now.
Yeah.
Moving on to our 6th seed, and this definitely hurts us.
This hurts a lot, man.
This hurts us as Raptors fans. We had the Toronto Raptors as our 6th seed, unfortunately. Of course, last year. Yeah, of course, last year they had a 53-19 record. Good for 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference.
Just third in the NBA.
Yeah.
No big deal.
No, 2nd.
Oh right, yeah, we were second.
We were second.
Second in the NBA. Just no big deal.
The main thing with the Raptors is
with no quote unquote superstar.
They're still winners. They have a great system, obviously, with Nick Nurse leading it. And then you have Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry leading the roster, right? They have a good team, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, first of all, they're not as good as last year. We can say that for sure. They're not as good as last year. And the thing is, bro, everyone else just got better. Everyone else got better, and everyone is good, right? In the East. Like, we're looking at 1 through 5, everyone legit got better or is still, on paper better than this Raptors team. And again, could the Raptors potentially get to that, like, number 3 spot just because of how well of an oiled machine they are? Yeah, for sure. As we talked about, everyone on this list is interchangeable, to be honest. Right? Everyone on this list is interchangeable in their spots.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Raptors that I think we need to clear up is the fact that they're definitely taking a step back, and I think a lot of that, what we really noticed it was during the offseason. Just they were being very, very conservative for next year's offseason.
Which got screwed over. We'll talk about that.
Like, that's now another conversation in of itself. But the fact of the matter is they intended to take a step back in order to potentially take 5 steps forward next season, or potentially 3 steps forward next season.
Well, that was the plan.
It was the plan, and it still can happen. which again for you casuals out there, it still can happen. There are multiple ways to make an make a championship roster. But like Zeeshan said, the continuity factor, the fact that the Raptors still have the same system with basically the same core minus maybe like what Ibaka was their fourth maybe fifth best player. Like if we're being realistic, like we got Lowry, we have Siakam, Lowry, Van Vliet. Um, at times you can say OG or Norman Powell were better than Ibaka.
Yeah,
but we're talking like your fourth or fifth best player on player.
But again, he was very valuable.
He was very good. Ibaka, and he's going to be missed this season.
And also Marc Gasol.
And Gasol. Right?
But yeah, overall the Raptors they have a good team, but it's just everyone else is very good as well. Everyone's better, but at least on paper.
I'm not gonna be shocked if they're a 4 maybe 3 seed in the conference. Like
again,
it just won't surprise us.
Everyone on this list this year is definitely interchangeable, I think.
Yeah, which brings us to the number 7 seed, and man, I got burned by this team last year, and I really don't want to get burned by this team again. But they're just too good for us to not put them into the playoffs.
Hey, think about it this way. I agree with you this year. So
okay.
I agree with you on the team.
Okay, he agrees with me this year. You know, I mean, although I don't think it was a bad pick last year, but you know, obviously suspensions kind of screwed that over. But for the 7th seed, we're predicting the Atlanta Hawks to be the 7th seed. Last season, they finished with a record of 20-47, which was the good enough for the 14th seed in the conference.
Bad enough.
In their case, good enough, I guess. But the Hawks, the reason why we put them as a 7th seed was primarily based on their offseason. Man, they made a lot of good signings. Like, they signed Rajon Rondo. They got Bogdan Bogdanovic off the Kings. They signed Danilo Gallinari, Chris Dunn, Tony Snell. On top of all of their young talent. Like, they still have Trae Young. They still have John Collins. They still have DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Huerter. Cam Reddish. They just drafted Onyeka Okongwu.
And Clint Capella hasn't even played yet.
And Clint Capella.
He's pretty much a new addition as well.
Like, this team, on paper, looks to be like a playoff team. And honestly speaking,
they're very talented.
It's a very talented team. And honestly, offensively, this team is going to be just fine. Like, they have an amazing offense. I think all they need to do is just be decent on defense. Which, again, the pieces that they brought in Clint Capella, you know, they still have DeAndre Hunter, Onyeka Okongwu.
Cam Reddish
took
a lot of steps on the defensive end as well.
Like these players, Chris Dunn, like Tony Snell, these guys are gonna help Atlanta be a better team on defense. How much better? Well, we're gonna have to see. But this team should, and I'm prefacing this heavily by saying they should make the playoffs, and we think they're good enough to be a 7 seed.
Again, we're talking as you're talking about their defense. They just need to be good enough, right? They don't need to be amazing defensively. They just have to be good enough. And it can be argued that they probably never will be amazing defensively with Trae Young, right, being there, because he's just not. He's one of the worst defenders in the league. Not really his fault, right? But that is the facts, right?
Some of it is.
Some of it, but mostly it's not really his fault. But it is the facts of the matter, right? But they only have to be decent on defense, which they have enough players to be able to do, right? Clint Capella, Rondo, DeAndre Hunter, Chris Dunn, Cam Reddish. They have enough pieces to at least be decent. They only need to be decent because their offense should be amazing. Like, it should be great, right? You're talking about so many interchangeable pieces alongside Trae Young to be in the lineup. Like, the one thing that I would say might need to change for Atlanta is, even though I like him, Lloyd Pierce. Right, the coaching might need. There might need to be a better coach in there.
I think we're gonna have to wait
to reflect, you know, like the changing direction of the franchise.
Well, I think we're going to have to wait and see. I want to see what Lloyd Pierce is going to be able to do with this roster. I want to give him a chance. But if he fails this season, or this team underperforms, then absolutely, I think a coaching change needs to be necessary because there's just too much talent on this team for them to not make the playoffs.
Especially given the problems they had last year, which, although they weren't a, you know, greatly talented team, especially as a young team, the problems that they were having, like the way they were playing, minus, I would say, Trae Young, you know, the way they carried themselves through games, the effort they put in, it was very questionable for the coaching staff, I think, watching a lot of their games.
Well, I mean, they sucked on defense, which, again, half of defense is effort.
Exactly, right? So we'll have to see what happens with Lloyd Pierce. Yeah, like as you're saying, I'm willing to give him a chance. But, we know what happens when franchises change direction, right? The first thing to change is usually the coach.
Wow.
So we'll see what happens with that. But moving on to our eighth and final spot of the Eastern Conference playoff race, we have the Washington Wizards, who last year had a 25-47 record, good for the 10th seed. Now, obviously, the main thing with the Wizards is that they have Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal as their top duo now. Again, it won't be perfect, right? It definitely won't be perfect. The fit isn't seamless, but I think it'll be good enough to make it for a number of reasons. Number one, you're looking at an all-star duo, and which in the Eastern Conference, after Brooklyn, there's not really much of that, right?
I mean,
Brooklyn.
You can argue maybe Boston's, but
No. So Boston, Philly, and Brooklyn seem to be the only, or I guess you can throw in Miami with Bam and Jimmy, with the certified All-Star, All NBA duo that the Washington Wizards have. Now again, it's not gonna be a perfect fit, and with Russell Westbrook definitely, he has his issues on the court, but you're looking at a team that has that duo in the Eastern Conference. I think it'll be good enough, right? And not to mention the fact that Bradley Beal has already played with a guy that plays mostly the same as Russell Westbrook. Now there are a good number of differences if you want to look at it like properly, right? Which we don't have time to do. But in terms of the general play style, it shouldn't be too much of a difference for Bradley Beal to play alongside Russell Westbrook, right? Which is why I think they won't need to adjust that much. Then you talk about the Wizards having a great offense as they did last year, especially, with them re-signing Davis Bertans. The Wizards had a great offense last year, and that should hold up this year with their
very
duo.
fast paced.
Yeah, very fast paced. Thomas Bryant. Like, they have a number of nice players. And then obviously you have your young guys in Rui Hachimura, who looked very good in the preseason. He looks really good. And then obviously you drafted Denny Avdia. He looked pretty solid as well. And then another guy that I like is Troy Brown Jr. I think he's a very good player as well. So you have a number of pieces on this team that can contend for that 8th seed.
I think a lot of putting the Wizards at the 8th seed, I think, comes from the fact, like similar to what we said about Brooklyn. Westbrook and Beal are just too talented of a duo to the point where, like, even if the team struggles, these two guys are good enough to pull out some wins. And again, it's not going to be a perfect and seamless fit, but Bradley Beal's already kind of used to playing with a similar play style when he played with John Wall. But one thing I do want to even add to that, because Bradley Beal's been playing without John Wall for the last couple of seasons, and he's been amazing. So when you factor that in, when you factor the fact that Beal has gotten even better than what he was then.
Exactly. That's a good point.
And then on top of that, like, now you bring in Westbrook in, which again, Westbrook comes with his flaws, but he also brings a lot to a team as far as energy, effort,
leadership,
the ability, the slashing ability. And I think he's a very underrated playmaker. I think people just think that he stat pads a lot, but from what I see, Russell Westbrook's a very good pick and roll player, and he's good at finding the open guy, especially off of the off ball when he's sucking in a defense to find that off ball.
I think there is a bit of that Rondo factor to him, where he holds the ball until he knows he's gonna get assist kind of thing. There's a bit of that, but I think if you control that somewhat, if you're Scott Brooks, not to mention, I'll say that right now, Scott Brooks, the familiarity with Russell Westbrook and Scott Brooks, obviously.
I mean, Westbrook has had his best years with Scott Brooks.
Exactly.
So, I mean, again, it's not.
I think that's debatable because he probably had better years with Billy Donovan.
So he's most efficient and most effective years came under Scott Brooks. He also had some good years under Billy Donovan for sure, but I think Scott Brooks has a familiarity with how Westbrook is as not only as a player but as a person, and I think that's something that will help them. But like we said, it all really comes down to the fact that Westbrook and Beal are a great duo, and that talent is just better than some of the other teams that we're just going to mention right now. Speaking of a team that is actually falling out of the playoff race, in our opinion, for our 9th seed, we are predicting the Indiana Pacers to be the 9th seed this year. Last season, they finished with a 45-28 record, which was good enough to be 4th in the Eastern Conference. And the Pacers basically brought back the exact same team as last year. Like literally, I don't like see any new acquisition on this team. The problem is with the Pacers, the rest of the Eastern Conference just got a lot better, and this doesn't help the Pacers. This is a team that's been plateauing for the last couple of years now, with constant first round exits. They've been solid in the regular season. They've shown that they're, I guess, a good team. They're a good team, but they just can't get out of the first round. And in this case, with the rest of the Eastern Conference is getting a lot better, and with the question marks regarding Victor Oladipo and how effective is he going to be coming off of an injury, it's really hard for us to picture them being better than Atlanta or being better than Washington this year. The play-in tournament in the bottom of the Eastern Conference is going to be very interesting this year, but
the one thing for the Pacers is that just the continuity factor,
yeah,
which could be big for them, and the fact that, again, they're not a bad team at all. They're still a very good team, and that could just propel them into the playoffs if another one of these teams that we named before just has a terrible year, right? So I think that could be a factor. Another potential issue, or not even potential, it is an issue for them that you didn't talk about, was the Miles Turner Domantas Sabonis issue,
right,
which is still an issue for them,
yeah,
right? Even though they tried to smooth it over a bit last season, it's still not working. It's still not working. You're gonna have to get rid of Miles Turner somehow, and hopefully receive some good assets for him.
But here's the other thing that you want to also look into: the fact that if the Pacers don't make it to the playoffs, Victor Oladipo is a free agent this year, and it's one thing to watch to see if he can regain his form, but he's in a contract year, and if the Pacers don't make it to the playoffs,
all indications,
he might leave.
Well, according to all reports, it's indicated that he's probably going to leave.
Like, even like from the financial standpoint, like they're not willing to pay him what he wants, and they're not winning. I just don't see, if that happens, I just don't see Oladipo sticking around in Indiana, which is why we kind of have them as the 9th seed.
Again, just not as talented as the other teams.
Yeah, just the East got better, and some teams had to drop out.
Yeah, that brings us to our number 10 seed. I know a lot of people are going to be mad about this, but because of the fact that they do have a big fan base, and they are a very passionate fan base.
Yeah.
But we have the Chicago Bulls as the 10th seed. Now, again, like the thing about the Bulls that Bulls fans talk about is that they have a very young roster, but very talented roster, right? Kobe White, Zach LaVine. Hopefully, maybe Zach LaVine can make an All-Star team this year. Kobe White should be very good this year. The thing is, they brought back the same roster, except for obviously they drafted Patrick Williams at number 4. They brought back the same roster. Now, yes, they will improve, and I think their improvements will be great. I think their young players are going to be very good. But it's just, they're not good enough to get them over that hump, and they're not good enough to push into the playoffs, especially against the other teams that we previously named.
That's true.
Right? They're not good enough as a team. They're very nice. They're very exciting. But again, talent-wise, they're just not there yet. The one thing that will work in their favor is the fact that they don't have Jim Boylan anymore.
He's gone.
He's gone.
The punch clock is gone
They
too.
have Billy Donovan now, which means that their team should be better. Again, this team, I think a lot of the other teams as well will be better, right? The Chicago Bulls will be better than they were last year. I firmly believe that. Now, the record might not show that because of the fact that everyone else just got better. But I think internally for them, they will be better. And for them as well, they don't need to make the playoffs, right? They have a young team. They don't need to necessarily make the playoffs. It's just about that internal improvement that they have, which I think they will have this year.
First thing I think we got to talk about with Chicago is now that they have some semblance of competency back after, getting rid of Jim Boylan and whatever he was as a head coach.
And they got rid of Jim. Do they have Paxson or Gar Forman?
They have Paxson.
They have Paxson still.
Gar Forman is now a special advisor to the Pelicans, apparently.
Yeah, so they still have John Paxson on the team as an advisor, though. The main thing is that they got Arturas Karnisovas as their president, who brought in Billy Donovan as their new coach, right? So they, again, to your point, they have a lot more competency as a franchise. They have a lot more stability.
Which is key. And now when you bring in competency, now you start bringing in direction, and now that way you can start building towards making making it eventually to the playoffs. And this is a young team, like you said. I mean, like it's a team that again is going to look a lot better. We've already seen glimpses of it in preseason. How they're just playing a lot better. They're utilizing players better. Kobe White is looking very, very good in this preseason.
Hopefully, I think the one thing is hopefully Markkinen.
Markkinen has been okay. He's been a lot better. I think he's been utilized, I think, correctly.
Yeah, Jim Boylan
this season, so
making
far.
him like a spot up shooter, bro.
Like once again, like this wasn't a huge offseason for the Bulls, and I don't think this is going to be a great year as far as the record is concerned. But I think internally, now that they have direction, they can start building forward, and they can start it's like they have a foundation, and now they can kind of just build their way up. Which for them, for a rebuilding franchise, that's a key element to success. So yeah, we have the Chicago Bulls at the 10th seed, which brings us to the 11th seed. Now, some people will question this one, but we predict the Orlando Magic.
Will they? I don't know if
some people might, considering they were last season's 8th seed at 33-40.
They were also the previous season.
season's 8th seed. But basically, this is the same team as last year. The problem,
the Orlando Magic,
yeah, it's the same team as last year. They have the similar problem like the Indiana Pacers, where the rest of the East just got better, and the Magic have just stayed the same. I mean, they've been in the 8th seed for like two years in a row, 3 years in a row, 2 years in a row. They brought back they paid basically everybody from that first 8th seed appearance.
Yeah,
and now they regret all those contracts.
I mean, I don't even know if they do, just because of the fact that I don't know if they would have done anything else better.
Well, here's the thing that I am still concerned about. Jonathan Isaac is not healthy. Now, again, I feel so bad for the guy because the guy came off of a knee injury only to get another knee. I think he had an MCL and he got an ACL.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I think if Jonathan Isaac was playing, we could potentially have Orlando higher.
Yeah.
But Jonathan Isaac, him not being there, really deflates their team in terms of the fact that he was their best defender. He's one of the best defenders in the league, period. His offensive game was looking good for them, right? He had really improved a lot over the past 2 years on his offensive game. Yeah. But now, without him, you lose that. Obviously, Nikola Vucevic is still your best player, but it was looking like Jonathan Isaac would be that best player for them, probably this year or starting next year.
I mean, sure. they still have some pieces. I mean, Markelle Fultz is looking a lot better, with the Magic. He's been a lot more comfortable. Jumpers getting back to form. But I think one thing I want to do is I think the Magic need to get rid of Aaron Gordon. He might. I just don't see it working in Orlando anymore, and they need to do something different.
Speaking of Aaron Gordon, I think if you want to get rid of Aaron Gordon, if you're the Magic, I think this year is as good as any.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that now without Jonathan Isaac, and we've seen this, without Jonathan Isaac, Aaron Gordon plays a lot better.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, the fit with him and Jonathan Isaac is not ideal. But when Jonathan Isaac is not on the court, we see the glimpses of what Aaron Gordon could become in the right situation. So now if you're committed to Jonathan Isaac, which the Magic should be, or, they might not be considering Jonathan Isaac's injury history, which is a problem. But, you'd rather have Jonathan Isaac than Aaron Gordon. If you commit to Jonathan Isaac, now you can show off what Aaron Gordon can do without Jonathan Isaac, and you raise his value, and then you trade him, right?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I mean, we're talking about the Magic have just kind of been at the plateau, and they're kind of now in a point where they need to make a move. Otherwise,
they're gonna stay in the same spot.
They're just gonna be stuck in mediocrity.
Yeah. Speaking of mediocrity as well, in terms of franchises who are mediocre,
wow,
we have the Detroit Pistons at the 12th seed. Now, last year they had a 20-46 record, good for the 13th seed in the Eastern Conference. Detroit is not a terrible team, but they're just not a good team. I think their ceiling is being average, to be honest. Hopefully they have Blake Griffin coming back at a decent amount of what he was. What was it, 2 years ago, right? I think it was 2 years ago when he first got there.
Yeah.
So hopefully he can retain that form, though again, I'm not really that hopeful. But I mean, hopefully he does. They did bring in Jeremy Grant, who we were critical of that move, but in terms of without the financial part, bringing him in, I think was a good move for them, right? In terms of what they could do, aside from obviously the opportunity to get other free agents and then the contract that they gave him. But in terms of strictly on-court product, I think bringing in Jeremy Grant was a good move. And then obviously they got like DeLon Wright. They still have Derrick Rose. They drafted Killian Hayes. They have a couple of pieces who are okay that can be nice. But again, a 12 seed is just what they are. They're just not that great. They have a couple nice pieces, but after that, it's not that great, especially in a loaded Eastern Conference. There's not really much else to say for Detroit. It's just not a great overall team.
Yeah, I will say this: they do have some developmental hope with Dwayne Casey being their head coach.
Sekou Doumbouya.
They do have Sekou Doumbouya as well.
Hopefully, he can be something.
I mean, again,
he has a lot of potential.
He showed some flashes.
They drafted Sadiq Bey as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Dwayne Casey, if he's one thing, he's a good developer of talent, which is something we've witnessed firsthand in Toronto. And he can get wins. Like, he's able to get the most out of his players. So he's obviously that puts the positions of Pistons to be better than some of the other bottom feeders in the Eastern Conference, but they're just not good enough to go anywhere else higher than that.
Yeah.
Which brings us to a team that, has a lot of hype, but to be honest, won't do much. It's the Charlotte Hornets. We're projecting them to be the 13th seed in the conference. Last season, they finished with a 23-42 record, which was good enough for the 9th seed. And man, this is a young and exciting team. They drafted LaMelo Ball, which is a lot of hype around that one. They still got Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier. Like, they still have PJ Washington. They also have Miles Bridges. Like, this is a young and exciting team.
Malik Monk.
Like, again, this team is very exciting. We've even been seeing them play in preseason, obviously, like with the Raptors playing them and all that.
Yeah, obviously the LaMelo's 4 assists are getting highlighted 95 times.
Yes, and Malachi Flynn just torching him. No big deal though, right? LaMelo's the number 3 pick though, but you can see LaMelo is gonna be a big box office draw. Like he's a very flashy player.
Which Charlotte definitely needs.
They need it. Like they definitely need it. And I think this team is young, but once again, they're a young team. And we saw this actually in the preseason game with the Raptors. The first one, they started off extremely hot, coming in with a massive first quarter, absolutely
they were up by 20 or whatever.
Yeah, they were up big, and then the second and third quarter kind of happened, and the Raptors just erased that lead in order to take over and just win the game. And again, that's the difference. I mean, they're very bad defensively, but they have potential for a nice offense. They have a very fast-paced offense, and I think with their high flyers and PJ Washington and Miles Bridges, pairing that with the guards that can shoot, it's gonna be a fun team to watch.
Again, they're gonna be a bottom feeder, but they don't need to be any better. They're a young, rebuilding team.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. The goal isn't to make the playoffs right now. I mean, that would be nice for sure, but that's not exactly the goal of what they want right now. They just want to be able to develop their guys.
Oh yeah, and they have Gordon Hayward.
Oh yeah,
they do
have Gordon Hayward,
who just got injured.
Yeah, bro, I feel bad for him, for sure.
Hey man, he secured the
bag.
bag.
At least he got the bag, so that's good for him. Going to our 14th seed, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Last year they had a 1946 record, and they were last in the conference. This year,
spot up.
Yeah, they moved the spot up,
level up,
just because the Knicks were 15th seed are terrible. But yeah, the Cavs, they're a bad team. Similar, I think even when you're talking about the Cavs, though, they have a couple nice players. I think even we saw this last season where, though they did not have a good team, they were competitive for a lot of games. I think that's a very good sign if you're a Cavs fan from your young players especially Colin Sexton, who really improved last season. Darius Garland, towards the end of the season, really showed his potential as well. They drafted Isaac Okoro. They have Kevin Porter Jr., who, as long as he stays out trouble, then he'll be good as well. They have a couple of nice pieces. Now, obviously, the big questions are what to do with Kevin Love and Andre Drummond. So, it remains to be seen what Kobe Altman does with them. But they do have a couple of nice pieces on the team. The problem is they're just bad overall.
I mean, the reason why they're the 14th seed, let's be real, they have competency, which is something that the New York Knicks, who are the 15th seed,
yeah, exactly.
They just don't have at the moment. The fact that you still have some veterans in Kevin Love and Andre Drummond, to mentor the young player.
My guy, Jetty Osman.
You have Chetty Osman, the GOAT
Yo,
there.
Shaq MVP, JaVale McGee. Bro.
JaVale McGee is in Cleveland now too. Larry Nance. Like, they have some players. But again, like, it's not like this is not like any spectacular roster. I really think Kevin Love should be traded and Andre Drummond. The question is how? Like, their contracts are massive. And
well, Andre Drummond is on a 1 year, so
but that's still a big contract for Andre Drummond.
Yeah, that's true though.
Like, that's huge, man. Kevin Love, man. Like, we've already ranted about why Kevin Love signed that extension, but hey,
I mean, we ranted when he signed the extension.
Funniest thing is, like, I was my younger brother who recently got into basketball. He looks like Kevin Love, like, oh, he's not a good player. I'm like, you haven't seen Kevin Love play. He's just not trying right now. He's just collecting.
Well, I mean, obviously injuries are taking a toll on him, but for us who saw Kevin Love in his prime in Minnesota, he doesn't have to reach that level, but, at least if he can reach somewhat of that level on a contending team, that would be big for them.
A part of me just thinks he's not trying.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And then finally, we have our last spot in the Eastern Conference. This is the New York Knicks. No surprise there. They just don't have a good team. They have a very mismanaged team. For once, I think there is hope because of the fact that Leon Rose, he didn't make any stupid moves, which is a huge thing for the Knicks franchise. I like the draft pick of Obi Toppin. For him to fall to the
he's an energy guy, man.
Yeah, like, for him to fall to the 8th spot, I think was a very good
hey, man, I'll put my Michael Rappaport on. The Knicks, they suck. Like,
I mean, that was a terrible accent.
I know, it sucks. My New York accent absolutely sucks. But you know what? I don't have to live in New York because my sports teams are actually good. So
I mean, New York, aside from the Knicks, I think the New York teams are not.
Not really. I mean, the Rangers aren't that great. I mean, they just had the number 1 overall pick.
But at least, the Rangers have
the Giants are okay. The Giants are
actually, yeah, New York for the most part.
The Jets.
New York for the most part is going through it right now, sports-wise. But yeah, they need to get rid of, I think, some of their players that are overlapping with some of their young guys, like Julius Randle, Dennis Smith Jr., who unfortunately I don't know what his career has become. They need to get rid of Kevin Knox, bro. They ruined this guy's career, to be honest. And then they signed Austin Rivers.
Cool. I mean, remember, their coach is Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah, we're going to talk about him in a bit, but it's going to be interesting for sure, I think. Yeah,
so New York is just going to be, like, absolutely unwatchable this year. But yeah,
as they have been for the past while.
Yeah. But yeah, that was our prediction for the Eastern Conference standings. Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? How would you order the Eastern Conference for this upcoming season? Definitely let us know in the comment section on YouTube or on social media. Which brings us finally to the Up and Under segment. Now, this is a very eventful one. First off, are you up or under on Giannis Antetokounmpo signing the 5-year, $228 million Supermax extension with the Milwaukee Bucks?
I mean, as a Raptors fan, obviously we're under on it, bro. This literally blew up our whole hope for this offseason.
Look, see, that's a nicer way to put it. I have a lot to say on this. I'm under, not just from the Raptors the fans' perspective. I'm under on the sense that, why now? Why sign? Like, if I'm Giannis...
Yeah, bro, this guy literally just, like, he took everyone for a ride and then it was like, yeah, now I'm staying.
Like, why would I sign this extension? The same money I'm going to get next year.
Yeah, he could have signed it in the summer.
Now you basically trapped yourself. And I'm using that in air quotes, obviously, but...
I mean, he got 20...
He got $228 million, so that's a nice way to be trapped. But... why would you don't know what you're getting out of this team? You don't know, like, this organization clearly hasn't shown you that they can build a championship contender as of yet. Sure, they've made some great regular season teams, but this team has been a good regular season team. It's about winning in the postseason and being a deep playoff team, which they haven't shown that they can do. They made it to the conference finals and then basically got swept by the Raptors. So my thing with Giannis is, why sign it now? The only logical couple of reasons why I think he would actually do it. First off is because, well, he grew up with very humble beginnings, and maybe he just was tired of pushing away $228 million guaranteed away from him. Which, again, I never fault a player for securing the bag. I think...
I mean, that's the goal, right? Every single person.
I'm not going to fault the guy at all for doing that. But when you're going to tell me that your number one focus is winning, this is not a winning move. I'm sorry. And then not to mention the ramifications that this is going to have for the teams that did accumulate cap space to sign a player like Giannis. And we don't really have the time to talk about that in this episode, but we're going to actually talk about that in a future episode. But yeah, man, I'm under on this, man. I don't like the timing. I just don't think it makes sense from Giannis's perspective. And yeah, so I guess Giannis is off the market now. But one more thing I want to do before we end this part of the Up and Under segment. If Giannis doesn't win a championship in the next 2 years and he demands a trade, I'm absolutely going to rant on this, because I'm tired of superstars signing these massive contracts and then asking out after 2 years because they made a wrong decision.
I will say, number one, with Giannis signing the Supermax, it kind of locks Milwaukee flexibility wise. So this is probably, the roster is probably going to get as good as it is right now, right? That's the thing. I think for a different perspective though, as a general NBA fan, I will say I'm up on it because it for the small market aspect,
I guess.
Right? So we've seen, and even as Raptors fans, we suffer from this. We just suffered from it 2 years ago, actually, where everyone just pretty much wants to jet to LA,
New York.
or to New York. Well, not
Miami.
Yeah, Miami, right? And all the stars want to go to the big markets. And I think for the rest of the, what is it, like 25 other teams who are in small markets, or whatever, 20 teams, whatever number of teams there are that are in smaller markets, I think this signing and this move really gives a lot of hope for them. And it's a good move for the NBA, I think, overall,
but it's
in terms
also
of what they're trying to market.
It's also Giannis's personality, which a lot of players don't have that type of personality.
Exactly. Also, the fact that Giannis is an international player, so he didn't grow up in any part of the States or in any,
Yeah, he doesn't have that negative influence yet.
So there is no, hometown loyalty or whatever to any of the teams, right? Because of the fact that he essentially did grow up in Milwaukee, right? That is pretty much his home.
Yeah.
Especially with his, son being born recently, and all the family stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, from the perspective of a general NBA fan, I think it's good. Obviously, as Raptors fans, it sucks.
I'm just gonna say this, Giannis. Masai was gonna sign Kostas Thanasis. Bro,
everyone,
he would have brought
Alex.
Alex.
Yeah, Alex, bro.
Dude.
Everyone.
Oh man, you missed out, man. But you know what? We'll wait for you. In 2 years, when you want to come to us.
Well, I mean, if he came, all the contract flexibility would be gone. But moving on to the next point, we have: are you up or under on Paul George signing a 4-year, $190 million max extension with the Clippers?
So I am up on it from Paul George's perspective. I'm under on it from the Clippers' perspective. Obviously for Paul George, secure the bag. But you can't be way off P anymore. You gotta be you gotta find a new nickname, maybe preferably a better one.
They gotta get it done. They gotta get it done this year.
And that's why I'm under on the Clippers' perspective. You have to win. Kawhi is he can opt out next year.
Obviously, from all accounts, he's probably gonna resign. Which it makes most sense.
It all depends on how the Clippers do. If they flame out again, Kawhi's a winner at the end of the day. I don't see him sticking around with this situation with way off P. Now you're locking yourself in the Paul George for $190 million for the next 4 years.
Here's the opposite perspective, right? The Clippers brought in all those. They trade away all those assets for Paul George to bank on the fact that he will resign, and they got that done, right? They got that done. So from their perspective, though the on-court production hurts, from their perspective of giving up what they gave up to have a potential situation where Paul George resigns, it's a win from their perspective. Now, a complete win would be the fact if Paul George actually, plays well in the playoffs, which he hasn't done, right? So that would be a true win.
You can say his performance has been way off. I'm sorry. There's just too many ways to go with Paul George memes. But yeah, no, I'm just indifferent on this one. Moving on. Are you up or under on the Houston Rockets reportedly giving James Harden final say on all franchise moves after firing, including firing Kevin McHale and trading Chris Paul.
I'm under on this, man. This is what happens when you give superstars too much power. Now, obviously, superstars deserve a little bit.
Remember,
more
he was
power.
training in Las Vegas.
Yeah,
not going on a strip club train.
This is what happens when you give superstars too much power. Like, obviously, guys like LeBron James, James Harden, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, like these guys, Giannis, these guys deserve a certain portion of the power, right? Deservedly so.
Yeah.
But the problem is you have to have a limit on it. You can't just give in to everything the superstar guy does. And especially things like James Harden getting rid of Kevin McHale, James Harden saying to trade Chris Paul, who they gave up so many assets to trade for Chris Paul. Then you trade Chris Paul
to appeal to James Harden.
Then you trade Chris Paul and a number of assets for Russell Westbrook. And now you're stuck with absolutely nothing. And now this is where James Harden figures out.
And now he has out.
James Harden figures out that Houston can't give him any more because he used up all the resources. And now he's like, I want to ask out because of the fact that they can't give me anymore. Well, that's because you took everything as well.
Like, at the end of the day, superstar power is just something it's been an ongoing issue, especially with the amount of trade demands that have been happening in recent times on big contracts. And a lot of this has to do with just front offices that just, especially in the small market, you go back to the whole small market factor.
Well, Houston isn't even a small market.
But either way, the fact is, the matter is that Houston is so afraid of losing James Harden that they're going to do everything that he says. And he knows that. He knows that they're going to do anything James Harden wants them to do. And right now, they just can't do anything else to give James Harden.
You have to find a way to limit it and try to mend fences with James Harden. I saw I mean, Skip Bayless isn't really a reputable source to take, but his point to what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers, I think that was a good point. You know, if you watch the NFL, what the Packers did with Aaron Rodgers after, his whole situation of him possibly wanting out, and the Packers after giving in to so many of demands, just like cutting the rope and like pulling the leash on him, pretty much. But I think it's a comparable situation. But the problem is, football franchises have a lot more control.
Yeah,
and there's a lot more. The dynamic of power is not as fluid as it is in the NBA. Yeah. Right. So it's a very different situation in that sense. But Houston has to figure a way to replicate what Green Bay did with Aaron Rodgers.
And I don't even think Aaron Rodgers was as bad as James Harden has done. Like, Aaron Rodgers, honestly speaking, hasn't really demanded as much. You know?
Again, it's the difference of the power dynamic between NFL and NBA franchises.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know, it'll be an interesting situation for Houston fans. And then finally, are you up or under on the fact that Tom Thibodeau, new head coach for the New York Knicks, saying that the Knicks need a star?
Do I have to answer this question? Of course I'm hella under on this. Tom Thibodeau, what the hell do you think you were signing up for? You were signing up for the New York Knicks coaching job. You're not a developmental coach. You don't develop young players. So what did you think when your whole locker room is basically young players? Did you just not look at the roster? You're just oh, the New York Knicks are offering me how much? Okay, I'll come back.
The thing is that it's bro, this guy literally just got there and he wants to, I think, turn around a good thing that Leon Rose has been doing. Yeah. Where Leon Rose is not, he hasn't fallen for the big market trap or the New
York,
York,
not yet.
Or the Knicks mentality of just trying to gun for every single free agent.
Or the James Dolan
exactly,
effect.
the James Dolan. He hasn't fallen into that trap yet. And I think he's being cautious in his approach and thinking long term, which I respect that compared to what the Knicks have done in the past, however X many years. Now you have Tom Thibodeau come in and he wants to flip that whole thing, right? And I don't think that's a conducive way for success to happen.
Hey, and guess what? Tom Thibodeau already making trouble in New York? Who would have thought that was going to happen by hiring him? Oh, wait. It was me. I'll pull my Max Kellerman and then take full credit for something that everyone saw coming. But, yeah. I mean, it's Tom Thibodeau. It's the New York Knicks. They are a mess. But with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various podcasting platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, basically wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us. We're the Up and Under Podcast. Also, follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at @N_podcast, Facebook.com/UpAndUnderPodcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news like the Honest Supermax as they occur. So definitely follow us there for all the latest updates. And also check out our website, UpAndUnderPodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's also a place where you can read about each episode. We write blog posts with every single episode. So if you don't have time to listen to the full thing, you can read about it on our website. So definitely check it out if you haven't done so. And yeah, man, regular season is what? Within less than a week away?
Bro, NBA's back.
Fall's back. With that concludes this week's episode. We'll see you guys all in the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.